Wonderful evening, everybody. Glorious day today. And if anyone's seen the orcas in the bay, please don't message in. Yes. So good evening to, welcome to Governance and Resources on the 27th of April. And starting off then with apologies, but I think everyone's here. So no apologise, unless everybody feels something that they need to apologise for. No. Yeah, interests? Crochet jacket. Any other interests? No. If something pops into your mind, then let us know later on. Minutes. So first of all, we've got the public minutes. So has anybody found any issues with the minutes at all? No. Brilliant. So I'm happy to propose those minutes. Seconder? Councillor Slade. All those in favour of the minutes? Brilliant. Thank you. Then the confidential amendment, addendum to the minutes. Any? No. I'm happy to propose that then as well. The addendum and a seconder. Councillor Creek. All those in favour? Brilliant. Thank you. Matters arising from the minutes. So there are some overdue actions, but they're not actually really signed off until they have really been completed at the end of the financial year. So Anne and Andy are nodding frantically at me. So there aren't any obvious matters outstanding. So or actions. Does anybody have any queries? No. Brilliant. Well done. Awesome. Right. Right. So actions. Oh, so I'm just going down. Yeah, item 5. Sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. Right. Verbal and written questions. Has there been a stampede of anything that's come in? Oh, this is a great meeting, isn't it? Fantastic. But, you know, if you feel the need out there, please do communicate. Always happy to hear. Right. Next thing then is the review of the committee structures. And Andy, do you want to discuss this then, please?
Yes, please. So I won't go through the entire report, as members have got a copy. Happy to answer any questions. So I think the premise here is we've noticed over the last 12 months there's a number of crossovers between different committees. So what we've tried to do is look at a way of resolving those. What we're finding is having split committees, particularly the operational ones, it is difficult to never have crossover. You will always have crossover. You know, environment talks to facilities and buildings. When you take the youth centre on, the service inside is always going to need to talk to a different committee. And so, given that the structure for the council is now more strategic and less operational, it was felt now is a good time to trial a different approach. So you can change the structure for this forthcoming year on the premise that if it doesn't work, you are able to change it back, albeit there's a lot of work there, but you can do that. And so there's a structure that's being proposed here that's effectively merging the two more operational committees that hold all the budgets, so all the environment, the buildings together into one place, which makes some sense in terms of less duplication. You can pool your budgets better, your grant pots are all in one place, and so that kind of seems to work nicely with some of the more operational side of things, and also the scrutiny and overview of that and how you're spending them and how we're spending them as officers sits in one place. So that kind of seems to work on the premise that you would have an informal arrangement where you focus more on environmental matters on one month and then building matters on another. But if something did come up, there's nothing stopping you having that on the agenda. So it was a sort of trialling that. We've also had feedback, and it's continual feedback over the last 15 years since I've been here, around certain members not necessarily engaging and being as proactive as other members on committees. And so it was felt, well, actually, if you only have the two major committees, you either sit on planning or you sit on this one committee, then that kind of resolves a little bit of that. You can never get around that fully. So really, it was a number of things that kind of seemed to make sense, not wedded on the name. You know, all of this can be changed, it's subject to change. And there's a couple of tweaks, which I know speaking with, well, I say speaking via email, the Selection Working Party on the numbers, it was suggesting that we do change the C&E committee to 12 members, because there are 12 members that want to go on it. And if you look at the two committees combined, that kind of works. There aren't any operational issues there in terms of quorum, because there's 6 as a quorum. And you've got the biggest budgets there. And then planning and licensing, 8 members plus 2 substitutes, which again, I think there's 1 substitute vacancy looking at the numbers, but everyone else is on planning and it's their first choice. And then this governance and resources changed to say, well, actually, if you've got less committee chairs and vice chairs, you need to backfill that. And one of the other things with this is the outgoing mayor doesn't need to try and find a chair or vice chair. They will be placed on GNR under this structure, which makes sense because they've got that knowledge for the last year or 2 years or whatever, staying with the committee. So there's a bit of consistency there as well. So it was a new model. We've tried to kind of play it out and look and see what the issues would be. And I think what we've got to here is the least issue model. You will always have a few issues and teething problems. But I think if members are open to trying this on the premise that you're now going to be less operational in your committees, so you're going to have a lot more time to look at more strategic forward planning and then scrutiny, then this is the approach that we're recommending as officers that we try. And we've certainly planned through selection, the 2 models are there. So if you say no to this new model, we can fall back to the old model. We've got the members that want to go on those committees. But if you want to try the new model, we're ready and we can go next week and give it a go and see. So that was it, really.
Councillor North first.
So my thoughts, it is great because there was loads of, issues with the Killer Court. C&T did one, we were doing the other. My recommendation would be that we have 1 chair, but we have 2 vice chairs, one mainly focusing on E&F and the other on C&T, because there will be people who really love the C&T bit, but they won't like E&F, that part, the toilets. So that would be a recommendation for me. I don't know if I have to recommend it tonight and get a seconder, but I don't know if there is a seconder.
Councillor Jacobs.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I actually want to start by saying that I really disagree and I strongly oppose this recommendation. I've looked at it in full, I've scrutinised it, and the reason why I do is that, for me, fundamental to why I'm a councillor is my belief in democracy and community voice. Now, what this does is it creates actually quite a mega committee. I've seen through the last year on community and tourism, new officers just getting to grips with what it means to be a councillor, finding their feet and eventually finding their voice. And it's been really, really wonderful to see. And those same members, I don't see speaking up in the same way in our big, obviously the big council, full council meeting. So I've actually come up with 5 points, and I feel like I'm walking into this like it feels like it's already a bit of a done deal, and I hope that it isn't, and I hope firstly that members of GNR tonight would listen to some of my points, because what I'd hope to do is by the end of this come to a decision that we may have 6 months where we can actually consult with the members of our committees and with the new directors who've just started, who haven't really even got to grips with, they haven't, been to some of our committee meetings. So I want to actually propose that we have a delay for 6 months where we consult, and I want to share with my 5 reasons why. So firstly, I feel like it reduces democratic scrutiny at a time when complexity is increasing. And obviously we've got lots of high volume issues already. But like you mentioned, we want officers to have more operational kind of power, I guess, or abilities or delegation. But what that means is that we've got a really brilliant opportunity for those committees that have been quite operational to start to really think strategically about the town. So come into rethinking some of how committees work to be able to build in strategy means that an environmental and facilities meeting can actually really embrace what it means to have a strategic view of what we're doing in UKI around climate, around environmental issues, on both the environmental crisis and also the everyday environment of flower beds and other things like that. We're a Green-led, we're a Green majority town council. I think, I don't know if we, politically it's talked about that, but what that means is that I have faith that we have really great councillors who care about climate and environmental issues. It would be sad to think that this was also the council that got rid of didn't re-merged it, but took away some of that strategic and democratic accountability of what a really kind of community engaged committee can do. Second, I think it shifts power away from members towards officers, because what happens when agendas are too large, we already know that we can go on for a couple of hours, and sometimes we've had to extend just with these things that we're looking at. If agendas get too large, then we don't have time to really scrutinise and get into that debate. So if it is driven by workload pressure, then maybe it's about looking at governance and designing it better over the coming 6 months and having at least an alternative proposal to look at. So I mentioned about the members that I've seen really come into their own on our committee. And I'd be really, I guess I'm also fighting for them in this meeting, because I'd be really concerned that we'd lose their voice in a very sort of mega committee structure which we're looking at. I think what it does is it concentrates power with a few, and I think we're a town council that wants to see power shared with many. So as I mentioned, I don't think it's fully explored alternatives. It presents a full structural merger as the solution, but there should be other ways to address overlap and workload. And we've already discussed with community and tourism, and Liz and I have started the conversation about looking at maybe 4 formal meetings a year, but then we also open up some of those to, tourism is a key element and an economic driver for our town, and being able to invite members of the tourism businesses into an open meeting where we can hear from them on how we can serve them better. Having a dedicated meeting to youth services is something we could also do. So we have these open meetings where we invite members of the public. Obviously we invite into these sorts of structures, and we often see empty chairs. And so I just want to end really to say that, does this proposal strengthen democratic oversight and community voice? I'm not convinced that it does. We're not here just to, we're here, as I mentioned at the beginning, to represent the community, to represent the voting public, and ensure that this council has democratic scrutiny. And I don't feel that this structure does that. I feel it'll overcrowd the agenda, and it won't give members and us representing the public a real voice and to be able to shape the strategy for the town. That's why I oppose this, and I ask and implore my fellow members tonight to at least vote for a pause for 6 months where we could consult with our committees and propose an alternative. If for that 6 months there is no workable alternative, then we could go with this, but I don't feel like we should test it out and see. I feel like we should explore the alternatives and at least have 2 proposals on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one of for me, well, and I know for others as well, one of the main issues that has is that the committees as the structure as they have not been quorate on numerous occasions, and meetings have been cancelled, and then things haven't been managed to be decided, and there's people been waiting for grants, and they haven't been able to be paid out because of that. So we're trying to find a system that overcomes the attendance issues. That's the main driver for changing this pattern. Councillor Wright.
I think I agree that those were issues, but I think the issues with C&T were from a previous administration. Since we've come into this last year and we've had new members, I don't think we've had, maybe we've had one challenge. Has there been that many?
Yeah, we've had emails to say that, haven't we? Or, sorry.
Has that been
interrupting?
No, it's
but
okay. I didn't realise
we had emails say there were quora and we then couldn't get on with our bit of work, and it was so frustrating because ENF, I think we were here every month. We were here at our meeting. The agenda is massive, and I understand what Councillor Jacobs is saying, but the thing is that in your recommendation is we would look at ENF things this month and C&T, they would cross over. I do believe that we do listen to the community. I've been here 14 years now on the council. I feel I've worked really hard. I appreciate all that the office does for us, and I do think we are very democratic. And although Councillor Jacobs said, you know, mainly agree in council, do you know, for me, we shouldn't even talk about politics in this room, because I've always been an independent, because I believe, as a councillor, I represent the residents out there as me, Margaret North. I'm not affiliated to anybody. And we have had over the years, up until last May, a period of 8 years where politics was so ingrained here that we didn't get things through because you could recommend something and a particular party used to squash everything. So for me, being a councillor is about being independent and not talking about politics, because that isn't why we're here.
Okay, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thanks for that. Where I would differ is you saying, I think the thing that I've always found when with the committee structures that it used to be, especially before when there was 3, is that you find that councillors just get in that bubble of that committee and aren't necessarily as aware of what's happening in the other committees. So I think I quite like this idea because it gets, the councillors get to know all the issues and you don't get the overlaps and the rest of it. The bit about more power to the officers, I think that's kind of like the operational side of things that we wanted to, you know, deal with, because on the amount of times that we used to be on ENF and we'd be arguing about what to do, how to fix this toilet and how to do this, that, and that's just like, just fix the toilet, you know. And I think the other thing is if people want us to have specific issues and things that they want to do themselves, I would assume we'd be setting up working parties and things for anything specific that people really want to get involved in. So I like the idea of like everybody who wants to be in an operational committee is there and it's got all the issues and you haven't got the overlaps, which is why I think it worked better.
I think as well, actually, for me, being the Bloom rep, unless there's a stampede of people wanting to be a Bloom rep, then I'll be, you know, from planning. Because the problem is that, you know, for people, you know, that we love planning, that we do feel left out, that we don't know what's going on in the other committees. So, so I'll be going along, you know, with the EF biased one, you know, in anyway. But you know, I'm wondering actually if not being a full council meeting, but whether actually everybody could sit on those committees as well, offer it open to planning, because otherwise, you know, I know for Councillor North and myself, you know, we've got those interests and we go to 2, but for those who don't, then that opportunity is there. I know you can say, oh, well, you can come and sit on the meeting, but you don't have any voting power. So I think, you know, sometime, I'm just put that out there as well, that I didn't realise there was like an events working party until I bumped into you in the corridor after it. You know, I don't know what, you know, who knows actually what all the working parties are. So I think there is sort of like a little bit of communication issues that go on there. I think Councillor Jacobs, and then were you waving your hand? Yeah.
So I think it feels like we're kind of taking, what's the word, a blunt tool to basically. I feel like there is if we're thinking of, is it capacity and communication, but by putting together one big committee, we're using a blunt tool to fix a problem. Is that the word? Anyway, someone will come up with, I'm sure you know what I'm trying to get at, basically. Yeah, there we go. There's loads of them. But what I'm really imploring is that we look at why we have communication problems, and why committees aren't aware of what is going on, other than putting everything into one big committee, because we have full council, we read all the minutes of all of the meetings that have happened that month or in that quarter. There's a lot of reading, but what we then have to do is to be really prepared when we're coming into our committee that we've also read everything to do with, because I really, really, really value and want to be a councillor and a member who can scrutinise the strategic and operational decisions of this council. And if I have bulk agendas where I have to look through every item and really dig into the detail, I wouldn't feel like I'm serving my members of the public well enough if I can't read in full the things that are coming up on an agenda. And so with a big agenda, I don't feel like I could do scrutiny well. Maybe other people would, but I'm saying that I don't feel like I could serve my members by serving the public well, by coming into a big mega structure. We're actually quite a sizable town council, and to have just 2 committees that deal with everything that the council does, where are we going to get that strategy? Where are we going to get that debate? Where are we going to get that scrutiny if we have to look at everything in full? And so, as I said, I just think we haven't even discussed it with other members, and we're making that decision for them on behalf of them and not being able to even consult with our committee. I think that's really unfair. Maybe we'll go to our committees and they'll say this is a brilliant idea, let's go ahead with it. But to make this decision tonight before even consulting with our committees, I think it's, and I know it's like, well, obviously the argument will be, well, we'll try to do it before the votes and the new structures, but there is no reason why a new structure can't, members we can't look at that. It doesn't have to happen annually. We're going to have to change the terms of reference anyway, and all of those terms of reference are going to have to be agreed at full council. So, I presume. So what I'm saying is, give us a chance to at least consult with our committee, and I'm saying this on behalf of the public and also on behalf of the members who've really been, coming into their own in our committee, and I feel really strongly that it would be such a disappointment to basically come from this meeting and say our committee is being scrapped.
Yeah. So I think we do scrutinise stuff now to quite a high degree. Did this was this in the printed options when we were which committees in? Didn't that go out to all staff, all councillors, really? So all councillors have had notification all of this on paperwork when the choices when you made which committees that you're going to on in terms of the 2 different structures.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the selection paperwork went out to everyone. Obviously, the detail around that wasn't fully out there, but it did say it was combining the 2 committees.
Right. Yeah.
I do have a few points at some point to make, because obviously delaying it 6 months and reversing the whole process is very different to trying a new structure where the accounts need to be set up correctly and then changing it back to an old structure. There is a lot of work there. So yes, it can be done. You would only do it if it goes wrong. You doing it the other way around, where you start with the current structure, then change it mid-year, is a major piece of work. That is across the entire council changing, including the accounts. So that's a mammoth piece of work. So I just make that point. And obviously, I could talk governance. I can talk all week about governance, but I think this has gone through all the directors. We're all signed up to this structure in terms of what we think will work. There are working parties you can set up that can even look at specific things within a committee. So if there are members that want to focus on events, you can have a working party on events. They don't need to worry about environment. They don't need to worry about anything else. So there are other things that we think we've ticked the boxes in terms of alternative approaches, and that we think is more democratic than reducing the number of meetings or looking at, you know, I'm looking at the C&T agenda for the last 2 months. There's 4 items on there that actually have reports. So there's no work there in terms of, if you look at what they're doing now, C&T reports, CCTV, it's all operational now. So you're not going to be talking about where's the new camera going. You will scrutinise the decisions mid-year or at the end of the year if something's gone wrong. So, you know, looking at the workload, C&T will not have the workload. So I think that's one of the other issues we're trying to resolve now before we hit mid-year and you find actually you're cancelling meetings. I think we cancelled the last one because there wasn't anything on the agenda.
Yeah.
So the work is running out.
Yeah.
And that's not to say the work isn't there. It's just we need to operate differently now. And it's moving across that journey to being more strategic. I think that's where we are at the minute. So that's all I would say as an officer, just an observation-wise, seeing it on the other side. You're running out of work on one committee. The other committee is having issues with crossover, where it wants to make some strategic decisions and can't.
Yeah.
And I think you can solve some of the issues that are being raised in a smarter way.
Yeah. Councillor Creek.
Do you want to let Anne come in first?
Oh, did you? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I missed you, Anne. Sorry.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the accountability side of it and the scrutiny, because one of the things that we're aiming to do is look at that in a lot more detail, and the councillor assertion reviews that you carry out haven't been overly successful, but they are part of your role. And I'm just wondering, in terms of scrutiny and the things that you're discussing, there could be the opportunity to have meetings with councillors to go through certain things in details that would cover some of that, and that might help with some of that decision making, looking at some, you know, because ultimately you are making the strategic, you know, looking at that strategic direction, but you have to be responsible as well for the decisions are made. And I'm just wondering whether we have that formal thing that already exists could be slightly extended to cover some of the scrutiny role, because it does fit under GNR in terms of that element. So that might support you a little bit more on that side.
Thanks, Chair. So I think firstly, I said this to you the other day, Jesse, I come into this meeting neither on one side of this or the other. And I think the debate here, you know, is really important. And I think you've raised a number of points. I don't think anyone's walked into this room predetermined, not least of all that we shouldn't anyway. So let's start there. I suppose what I can say, having been here for a little while now, and I know Councillor North, you'll back me up on this, is there have been so many times over the last 5 years that I've been here where we've got ourselves frustrated in knots over who's dealing with what part of our estate, or, you know, so whether that be the Killer Court and events, or whether that be CCTV and the skate park and all of these different bits of the town council that we do really well, but we struggle to kind of align. And we've tried a number of times to explore alternatives. E&F has always been a really heavy committee, a committee with a lot of decision-making power, the biggest budget, and a lot of assets to manage with a lot of public expectation. C&T historically has been less so. And years ago, I mean, 3 years ago, I think I suggested C&T in toilets to try and balance the mix a bit. That went down like a lead balloon at the time. It was flushed, yeah. So this isn't a new issue. This is an issue that we've faced for a long time. I think one of the really interesting pieces for me over the last couple of months, having worked on this kind of scheme of delegation and moving us from operational to kind of more strategic roles as councillors, is I've been shocked and surprised actually at how little workload has then gone on to the committee agendas. And I think on the one hand that's brilliant, but on the other hand I think what that does do is because clearly it makes the agendas less onerous and less decisions about what colour I'm going to paint that wall, you know, when are we going to buy the next vehicle, what vehicle is it going to be, when are we going to get these solar panels, which solar panel shall I buy, you know, like those decisions shouldn't be down to to councillors, we should be setting a strategy that says we want solar panels on that building, and the officers go off and find us the best value and the best version of that to fit with the strategic direction. So it's taken a load of that kind of operational stuff away, which means now we've got agendas that, as Andy said, you know, last C&T one got cancelled, and the last DNF, I was shocked we only had like 2 items on the agenda, I think, and we were done in record time. I'd never known an ENF meeting to go less than 2 hours. But in this new kind of world of problems that we have, in that we, you know, just don't have enough stuff to sit on these agendas, that gives us an opportunity, right, to be able to look at how else we can do stuff. And I know that you and I spoke about more community engagement, and I know I was chatting to one of the officers about, you know, exactly that, actually, you know, sort of engaging with the tourist industry as in like a tourist summit with, you know, both the TIC membership, people that may well be interested, and other stakeholders. And I wonder whether that's actually a better use of our time than having a committee for committee's sake. And I hear the passion, and I do, and I'm very much, you become, don't you, very protective over that committee that you've joined. And I know I certainly feel about that with ENS, as Councillor North will know. And I'm sure you do, and I know Liz does, around C&T. But I don't think it takes anything away, is what I'm hearing, from the merging of those 2 issues. In fact, I think there are some enhancements to be had for the reasons that have already been highlighted. I think there's, just to clarify, there won't be 2 committees, there will be 3, because GNR is obviously a committee, and it will have membership above and beyond the chairs and vice chairs, according to the paper. I actually really like Councillor North's proposal of, if we did go with the new structure, having 2 vice chairs with one with each, sort of kind of that historic speciality of both committees, if that's the direction of travel that we want to go down. But I don't think, I mean, what I'm hearing, and I do hear your passion, I think what I'm hearing from officers and from councillors is that we're not looking to lose anything, but actually what it does is it frees up that less formal, more informal ability to truly engage with the public in a way that, let's be honest, these meetings don't. You know, this might as well be a wall between us and the general public, right? You get 3 minutes to ask your question on the red light, and you can't ask questions throughout the rest of the meeting. Wouldn't it be much better to have a 2-way dialogue with the community in a kind of a working party? And we can of course create those, and we can invite members of the public with specialisms into those committees, and that for me would be a much better way of having that accountability and dialogue and feeding from the public than that. I mean, I do see it as a bit of a barrier, frankly, there. So those are my thoughts. I'm still not 100% either way, if I'm being really honest. I can see from a operational perspective, and I was thinking of Anne and her team, as you were saying, about doing it for 6 months and then switching over, going, my God, how do we do that with budgets and stuff? Because that would be, I imagine, a bit of a logistical nightmare, mid-year, kind of switching that all over and going, well, actually now we need to merge all of that, and the workload that will add. Those are the things I'm mindful of. So yeah, sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I don't have to apologise.
I went on a bit, as is often the case. I'll be quick.
Okay, then Councillor Jacobs. Yeah, no.
I think the thing is, we haven't, as we're doing 2 things at the same time. We're saying we're moving to more where officers can deal with more of the operational issues, and then the committees can be more strategic, but we haven't even had a chance for our committee to have that strategic oversight. I suggested some things that I would like on an agenda, and actually I was knocked back a little bit from officers in terms of, like, you know, I was like, I'd really like to discuss this at this next committee, and but it's like, I would like to know, not knocked back, officers would sort of push back a little bit, saying, well, another officer is already looking at that, and I was having suggestions for how we could use our committee for a more strategic way, and I met a little bit of pushback on that, and so I don't feel like we've had a chance to look at what it would mean to be able for us as officers and us as members to be able to start to set a more strategic agenda for our committees, and so I feel like we like that it's going to be more strategic, but it's also going to be part of this, as I said, if I've looked at the agendas of environment and facility, and it is quite an extensive agenda, and I do agree, but I feel like tourism and community will potentially get lost in that agenda. And what I'm trying to do and what we've been trying to do over the last year is think about how community, we represent the community, the things that people care about. We should be giving them more of a voice and more of an ability to be able to, we listen to them, we bring more strategic items to those agendas, and we have some really robust discussions, and I feel like we haven't even had a chance. We've only been, as new members, we've only been in place a year, and we're moving to a new type of structure when we haven't even really tested what it means for these changes to happen. I think it would be deeply disappointing. I think it would be disappointing for the public to think that community and tourism and environment and facilities, two big issues that the public really care about, how it will also be perceived to the public that we now have this one big committee, and particularly the proposed name, which it takes out tourism and it takes out the environment. That is, in terms of what people care about in Newquay, our whole economy based on tourism. We basically will be coming out of this meeting tonight saying there will be no more. It will be a big, but at the moment with its name, there will be no more environment committee and there will be no more tourism committee. That is what the public will perceive. How it comes, and we can argue it all we like, but I go on the Facebook, I go on the social media, I see how the public perceive decisions we make, and I just do not think we have given it enough time or consultation, or if we call it, you call it the Community Tourism Facilities and Environment Committee. Again, I'm going to stand my ground. I would hope that members would at least, if it's not 6 months, then give us a year to really think through how we can use our committees in a more strategic way, a more democratic way that brings in members of the public to help drive our agenda forward. It's what the public are asking for us. They continue to ask that we engage, that as a council, that we engage better and do better democracy with our public. It's part of the reason why politics is failing. It's part of the reason why the public are distrusting in politicians, because they don't feel like they're heard and they're listened to. And so I'm fighting for this committee because I feel like I'm fighting for their voices to continue to be heard and shape our agenda. And that does not say anything about the brilliant councillors that we have who do so much brilliant work with our public. But I'm saying that this move, to me, is anti-democratic.
Okay, so I was going to say, I think there's quite a bit of projection going on there. Actually, Councillor Slade is going to go first, then Councillor North, and I'll get my voice in a minute.
Just a quick one on that whole thing of being accountable and representing the people. I think the problem you've got with the separate committees thing is that the newer members in particular aren't necessarily involved in the big decisions that the other committee are making. I mean, the real big example is we had our environmental extraordinary meeting about the glyphosate. We had a full gallery. There's a really big decision, and Newquay pretty much helped drive the whole of Cornwall and bring down Cornwall Council's decision. Half of the members weren't even on that committee, weren't in the room. Whereas if we'd have had that big committee, everybody would be involved, and then they can go out and talk to the public about all the issues going on rather than just the issues on their committee. So I think it actually does make us more engaged with the community. So on that front, I think it's worth doing.
Just to come back to the committee selection, so each year we have a paper comes through and we have to select. There's no guarantee that everybody gets onto the committee they want to. So although somebody has sat on one for 12 months, do you know what? They might not like C&T. They might say to you, oh, it's great, I love it. But they could go for another committee. So there is no guarantee that happens. And we have the same thing every year. And I always feel for the officers, you know, because everything changes, you know, the chair can change, and often our direction can change. But I kid you not, community and tourism, you know, we sit here tonight, we give up so much time, and you say the public what they're asking for on Facebook, but they never present themselves here. They never put that in as a letter to us. You know, there are people sitting at home and often looking at something and criticising. It'd be lovely if every week we got something that they said thank you. I don't want people to thank me, but when you look at the criticism, sometimes it's really upsetting when you know what you have done to reach that point. You know, we've taken 5 years to get a restructure here. That's how long it's taken us, Drew and myself, who led that. 5 years it took us just to get to that point, because it's so difficult when you have sort of politicism in this chamber, because people can stop you doing what really we should be doing for our communities. And actually, community and tourism, we know about that, but they all need toilets. You know, the residents need the toilets, so do the tourists. So the two cross over so much that the name really doesn't bother me, because we had some crazy names before, didn't we? EDGP, or was it EDG? There was something of footpaths, FBOS, footpath, bridleways and open spaces, you know, so I think even then the public didn't, you know, probably didn't know what they were all doing. And I would say it's quite a small percentage of residents in the town that are really geared up with us, and it's only when it's something that they really are passionate about. Like when we called an extraordinary meeting, we got every member of our committee at that meeting about the weed killer, that we got some people in the gallery. So, you know, we can go out there, we can do community engagement, we can do all of that, and people will only come when they want a particular issue resolved. So.
Councillor Wright, and I think we'll think about wrapping this up, because it's, you know, it's coming up 2:15. We've still got the rest of the agenda. Then we'll take it to vote on full council.
So I also came into this meeting not being, I was sat in the middle of this because we'd had a conversation about the pros and cons, and I understand all the operational side of things, and my reason for kind of going towards a big committee was actually giving members the opportunity to see what was happening on different committees, and also to your point of people's voices coming through. We've talked now a couple of times about getting some training for councillors to kind of help people to think about the kind of questions that they need to ask, so they can improve their questioning skills and their confidence in this space. So that was and I think if we do decide to go with the new structure, then there is work to be done behind the scenes to support councillors in their confidence, in asking the right questions, in what you've just suggested, and with the scrutiny, but also just to counter the community engagement thing. You know, we are really talking about getting out there. The town council has improved its communication tenfold over the last few years, and people are engaging in a much more positive way now. And I think this especially with C&T, we really want to build on that, build on the trust that's being built, build on the engagement, putting ourselves out there, which we're doing on Saturday. So if anybody is around on Saturday and would like to volunteer their time to come and do cuppa with your councillor at the market, we do have a stall, so please all do volunteer. You are going to get an email about that in a second, because we need to be putting ourselves out there and, you know, having these conversations, improving on what we have done over the last few years. And I've lost my train of thought now because I got distracted by Saturday. But there we go. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So I hear your concerns around the name. I do, and I think, you know, you're absolutely right. We are losing a couple of words there that are key. Right, there's no doubt about that. But I think when it comes down to it, and I think we've proven this over the last few years, actually people won't pay any attention to the name, but they will pay attention to what we actually do in their communities. And so that kind of actions speak louder than words, that delivery piece for me, you know, the things that people remember of the town council, you know, won't be that we had an E&F meeting 3 Thursdays ago, but what it will be is that we put on the biggest Christmas event that this town's ever seen, and you know, over 10,000 people turned up to it. or, you know, we've built the world-class skate park, which, you know, which is unrivaled in most of, or certainly in the UK, if not Europe. You know, these are the things that they will remember. But I take your point on the name. I think the engagement piece, and I suppose I hear what you're saying, Jesse. I think the bit that I suppose I'm struggling with is linking in. So you say, I don't agree that it's undemocratic. I hear what you're saying, but I think I would disagree that it's undemocratic based on what's been provided in the reports. I think the bit that I'm struggling to link up is, I think what you're trying to say is you want more engagement of the public, and I think that is fantastic, because that's exactly what I've been calling for, and I think exactly what the corporate plan that we work with the community to pull together says we need to deliver. We need to deliver better engagement in our communities, and wouldn't it be great, rather than having a meeting in this room with that barrier, that actually once a quarter we held a meeting in Nansledden, or we held a meeting in Pentyre, or we held a meeting in Treloggan, as an example, to really reach those communities where they are in a meaningful way and listen to the things that they're looking for from us. I think that would be far more impactful than continuing on the current train of two committees whose workload now are becoming quite light. Actually, there's only so much you can do in this room when it comes to public engagement. You can't have that two-way dialogue across that barrier. You just can't. That, you know, that's the way in which the terms of reference are written, and we can't have that conversation with the public in this room. Yes, they should be able to hold us to account, and they can, but we can't have that decent conversation there. So I would be much more keen, regardless of the outcome of tonight, that we spend more time in our communities. And I know I've spoken to a number of officers about that. I suppose my final point, and I hear your bit around tourism, and it does drive our community here. There's absolutely no doubt about it, and a lot of what we do, and a lot of the facilities that we provide, not least of all our toilets, are largely, if we're being really honest, focused towards that tourist community, because we wouldn't need 15 sets of toilets costing us £400,000 a year if we didn't have £100,000 people a day coming to Newquay in the summer. We just wouldn't need them. So whilst tourism drives our economy, I think I think we've probably discussed, I think we have discussed this before, is that actually the people that pay for this town council, because all of our money comes from Precept, other than obviously our assets where we earn a bit of money, but 95% of our money must come from Precept, which is paid for by the council taxpayers, not by the tourists. And I get the economic drivers and all the rest of it, but at the heart of it, it has to be about the residents first. I would say tourism second. But that's just the way I think I would approach that. But so those are just what I want to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with the names of the committees, they're not named after the issues. They're named after what the town council does in terms of what it cares for after Newquay environment. It's not an issue-driven title for tourism. It's what the town council, how it represents, like primarily through the TIC and then events and things. I mean, it's not an issues titled committees, and the committees are really there for. I suppose overseeing Newquay Town Council's budget, that, as Councillor Creek said, was for the Precept that the local residents pay for. Right, I think we're all clear on terms of like the arguments and things like that. I don't particularly see that we're going to be going round in circles on this. So what I'm going to say is that this is the change into is sort of, I'm going to put it to the vote now, because it's going to go to full committee, full council. So the recommendation, then it goes for full council. Before that, have you had any other comments from any other town councillors on this at all?
No. But what I would just, as a reminder to members, there was a couple of tweaks in terms of numbers, which has come through selection process. So it's 12 for the combined committee if members are going ahead with that. 8 plus 2 for planning, and up to 10 for governance and resources. But I note the question over tweaking it so that you could have 2 vice chairs on the combined committee.
Which, yes, I mean, I think it's a good idea, and I think that that would be discussed at the committee, I imagine, or that would be in terms of reference beforehand. That would be terms of reference, okay. So I'm happy to propose that the new structure is then put forward to full council when it can be debated again. Can I have a seconder for Councillor North seconding that? All favour it going then to full council? Thank you. Against? And abstentions? Yeah. Abstention. Well, it is probably not in the wrong. I think it's probably in the wrong constant, though, isn't it? Abstinence. Yeah. Sorry for any English buffs listening. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. So.
Can I just ask, Chair, that we recommend the terms of reference have to go to full council?
Yeah.
The recommendation is that we have 1 chair, but 2 vice chairs, 1 leaning towards whatever.
Yeah.
Do we have to do that as a recommendation now?
That's all going to.
Okay.
I'll be changing that.
Yeah. It's at the end of number 6. Yeah, sorry. Right, okay. Thank you. Bear with when I'm just sorting out where we are. Right, number 7 is the GNR monthly budget report. So, over to Anne. Thank you, Anne.
Hello. So you've got 4 reports here. Excuse me. They are pre-year-end adjustments, so there will be slight changes, but GNR next time round will have all of the full reports following the approval of the accounts. But you've got your, the first one is your EMR balances, and that shows you the additions, the releases, and the commitments. Your next report is, the next one on the, is the 25-26, and again, this is up to the end of March with out the year-end adjustments going through it. So that's where you are with that one. And if you've got any questions, just ask. And then the following one is the project update, which gives you the breakdowns of the larger numbers, so you can see where it's been spent in a bit more detail. And obviously, if you want anything ever added onto these, then please just feel free to ask. And then what we've done, this particular, is the first time we've done this, is the final report, which I'm hoping to include on GNR going forward, all of the committees, but each committee will have their own, are the large variances. So that gives you the real detail, which is what you're focusing on. Because you know the little variances, the budgets, they happen throughout, but they're the large elements, and just some explanations of why they're there, and some of them are year-end adjustments and some of them aren't, and whether they're going to EMRs and things. So that was just for your information, and hopefully that's helpful for you going forward.
I love the way everyone's flicking through bits of paper. Councillor Slade, were you hoping to say something? No. Oh, okay. You're being naughty. Councillor Creep.
No questions.
Oh. You sure? Nobody? Nothing? Oh, marvellous. So all we're doing is voting for noting on this, so that we're happy with what's been produced, I think, and what's been done. And so I'm happy to propose noting for voting, which I love saying. Councillor North is seconding. All those in favour of this? Wonderful. Thank you. Marvellous. Right. Then we go down to item 8, which is the recommendation from Ian F about South Bristol car park tariffs. And again, over to Anne.
Thanks.
Sorry. Sorry, Anne.
No, it's absolutely fine. So this report has been prepared by Joe, and it's to do with the committee's decision around what we should be charging people in terms of the 20% less. We've gone through the figures because the committee asked me to double check that obviously the decision that had been made wouldn't impact on your budget, and I've done that and it's been revised and put through this. So essentially it's about not being not being too much that it would affect the budgets, but being cheaper than the other comparable car parks, which are the two that are more on the outskirts of the towns, which are named in here, the Tregonwell being one of them, rather than the car parks which are actually in the town, which aren't like for like really in terms of comparison. So it talks about new signage, the update, the time periods involved, and obviously the projected costs. And the fact, I suppose the biggest thing for the report is that there'll be no winter charges where we've had £1 per day. But like I said, I've done it on the usage that we currently have, and there's no impact overall. You don't earn more money, but you shouldn't lose money, and you should hit your budget target if the usage is the same.
So this has already been scrutinised by the NF thing, so it's just a recommendations.
And I believe we make a saving because you don't have to send the security people during the winter to pick up them £1 coins or whatever it is. So there is a little bit of a saving, although we're not, you know, making mega bucks, but we don't have to put that in place, which is good.
Yeah, I've accounted for all of the changes in that, because obviously there is a counting charge as well and all the rest of it on top of that, so it will be useful.
I do have something to say on this one. So a couple of things, and I probably should have brought this up in ENF really, and it's just popped into my mind, maybe because I was talking to the portfolio holder at Cornwall Council about it, but so we take cash at that car park. You've just said about that. What would be the annual cost as if we went cashless? I'm not suggesting that we absolutely do. I'm just really interested in the, you know, in the comparison. And secondly, just to reiterate the point that unlike the Lib Dems at Cornwall Council, we're keeping our car park free in the winter and not penalising locals. Political point over. The other thing I was going to say, and I know I've said it every year since we started doing it, and I don't think we did it last year, is we are going to be advertising this as the cheapest car park in town on the radio, right?
Yeah.
I've just scribbled that down, so I'll pass that back. So in terms of cashless, when you look at the amount of money that you take cash, I mean, it's not beneficial. The costs of collecting it and counting and everything far outweigh that. My thought process or my belief had been that that was a committee decision, that you wanted the ability for people to be able to pay with cash, and that was part of the decision that had been made, because financially you would just go for contactless. So if that's not correct, that's my belief of what committee had discussed and wished.
So, well, I'm just saying we are switching all the toilets, or intending to, because, you know, cash is becoming a thing of the past, isn't it? So is that...
On my watch, it's not.
My mother purposefully asked when she had some cash back for me to pay the chimney sweep in cash tomorrow from the supermarket. She wanted some coins as well, so she gives it when tips when she goes to the hairdressers. So she likes having her cash. So for the elderly residents in our society, for open access and things, then a little bit of cash is quite good. Right, Anne.
Just very quickly on that, our car park machine we've had for a number of years now, and it is getting to the end of its life. So maybe when we're looking at that and tendering, that could be a committee's strategic decision that you take at that point. And I think the general consensus for members has been that the toilets, you wanted that cash element, so that there is that possibility for both people, you know, different people that have it, but the car park might be different. So we can look at that when we're replacing the machine probably next year.
Marvellous. Right, okay. So, again, this is voting for formal recommendation, isn't it, to full council? No? Formal...
So this is effectively, if members are happy, it will give the estates manager delegated authority to implement everything.
Okay, yes. Well said. Well put forward. Thank you. And clarifying on that. So I'm happy to propose what Andy said. A seconder for that? Councillor Creek, I think, was the whippet. So all those in favour? Yes, wonderful, thank you. It sounds like, I love the way this is phrased, recommendation for enough killer court drainage. I mean, it's sort of like, it's sort of like our public open space has a, has a gastric issue. Right. So this I've written down in my notes. This is Anne. No. Yes. Yeah, Anne stroke Margaret to discuss on this one.
Oh. Oh,
because this has come from no, it's not. That was the killer. No, right. Sorry, I've got the wrong thing. Right,
do you want me to just go for it?
Right. So, oh no, I haven't written anything by this. Oh,
I'll just give you an update, shall I?
Yeah. We missed this.
There's obviously issues around Killicourt drainage, and there was a proposal. And what had happened is this had gone to, in the last financial year, to ENF, but because the contingency fund is held by GNR, it's come back to us, which is another delay that happens with that. But the contingency isn't an EMR, it is just part of your revenue line. It's something. So I am putting that contingency underspend back into EMRs, so you do need to agree that it comes from an EMR. And that's just where this is coming from. So A, do you agree that you're happy for the works to carry on? And to go with the contractor who's proposed within the report, but also recommend to council that it's put into an EMR from last year and taken out in this year, just to complicate things.
So all those things that our finance officer has just said in a very eloquent way. So is this voting to do this now and or voting for full council as well for the recommendation? So voting for both, I don't need to assume separately, do I? No. So I'm happy to propose what she said. And seconder, I think Councillor North just beat you to it, Councillor Wright. And unless it was a question. No. All those in favour? Yes, of shifting the budgets around. Sorry, it's because my screen doesn't keep up with it, and I seem to have missed it when we had our discussion. Right. Financial regulations. So this has been, is that right? Yeah. 10. Financial regulations. Oh. Are you keeping up there? Where's your big pack of stuff gone? Right, and there's a lot's been done on this, a lot of hard work. Well done, thank you, Anne, for this in terms of rewriting it. And there's the old and the new. So, Anne, do you want to go through this for us in your eloquent way?
I'd love to. So I want to explain. There's two reasons that there's an old and a new. The first is there is a model financial regulations now across all town parish councils, and I wanted to put our financial numbering, our financial regulations in the same format as everyone else's, so that there's some consistency across. So when you move things around as much as I did to get all the numbering the same, it was horrible to look at. And plus I've made a lot of other changes. So that's why you've got an old and a new, because when we were doing it, the formatting just went absolutely crazy and we couldn't deal with it. So apologies, because I know that you all like track changes, but it just wasn't possible. So I'll just go through the key highlights, and if you've read through them and you've got any questions, then please let me know. There is a substantial change in these financial regulations because we are moving towards the scheme of delegation, officers making decisions and moving within their budgets. It's only within budget unless it's emergency expenditure. The town clerk and myself in his absence have slight amounts which are specified again in the scheme of delegations for emergency expenditure, but for any project or any spend that is to go over budget, it has to come back to a committee. So there is an explanation and an awareness from you as committee members. But the whole idea was that, you know, the officers, the directors had the operational ability to run their departments. So that's gone throughout all of this financial regulations. And there's been a change in obviously the way we work because of that. So that's, you know, I wanted to highlight that. In terms of the way that it's been prepared, there are now areas which are either highlighted in bold or have must or shall. They are like your statutory requirements. You cannot change them. And I thought that's what the new policy and the models do now, so that you can see the differences in where you can and can't change things. So that runs through this. I've tried to be much clearer on elements in terms of clearer wording, responsibilities, processes, but it'd be much more at a strategic level, not the kind of day-to-day decisions of how you run your finances. That's my job. That's what you pay me for, and we are audited by an external and an internal auditor, so they scrutinise that, as well as you as a committee through your assertion reviews. So again, this is much higher level than it might your old set of financial regulations. So yes, they are a bit more streamlined. In terms of the payment processes, in the old one you've only got a tiny little bit about banking and payments, but this is much more descriptive around each specific type, what you can use it, how it's authorised, and it's much more in line with what our new approval process is through the scheme of delegation, because that's all changed. You know, everything used to come to committee and now it's not, so we've had to adapt and include that. And yeah, so it's much more in depth, but it's much higher level, and it is in line with our scheme of delegations. The biggest change is around, or there are two changes. One, which is much smaller, is your assets and properties. Previously, last year, we agreed that we would put a de minimis level of a fixed asset of £5,000. Now, when I looked at doing that, that pretty much wiped out everything and you had no asset register. So I was like, that's not really going to work. So we've lowered that, and in this document, I've reduced it to 1,000. It was 250, but that means you've got a reasonable level in there, and I am working through your asset register for the year end, where there will be a massive amount of write-offs in your asset register, because they're all the stuff that's in there previously that was less than £1,000 that we've put in. But it will be much easier to manage and should be much easier as well, and the right level. So I wanted to highlight that. In terms of procurement, the biggest changes are the change in the procurement regulations and the fact that now it's not contracts finder, it's finder tender. And we've changed our values, and this is really in the annex of this these financial regulations. Anything between £0 and £5,000, we try to go local, and you require one quote. Anything between 5 and 25, it's 3 quotes, or the tender process. You have a choice depending on how big a market and how the time frames that you are looking at. If you've got more time, you would go to the tender because it's more of an open process. But if it's something that's much lower key, you can then obviously do 3 quotes. 25 to 60k, as previous, you can go for 3 quotes, or you use finder tender, and that's going to be your section where you would tend to go to the finder tender, because it's more than the 25k. And then you've got anything above 60,000, which would be a tender threshold for this council. All these figures tie up in line with your scheme of delegation again, so that's why it's 60. And then the only things that I haven't included, which I think I probably should, although there is a link to it in the document, is the actual above threshold numbers. I think I should put those in. So supplies and services are 207,720 and the works is 5,193,000. So they're big numbers that we're not going to get close, but I think they should probably be within this document under that section. But they're the kind, that's the big change in this document. And, you know, if you've got any questions or read through it, or then please let me know. They changed in January.
Thank you, Anne, for quite a comprehensive change. Oh, sorry, Andy. Councillor Jacobs.
Hi, thanks, Anne, for that. Yeah, there was lots of great detail in there. It's nice to dig into it. One of the questions that I did just have was just on procurement, and you mentioned about the values. And I guess I wondered, because I know other councils across the country, I guess in terms of when you go out to tender, and how much you can kind of, I guess, score against local organisations and local businesses, because I'm guessing that there's a way that you can put more sort of, like, I don't know how you say it, but you can basically specify that you would like local contractors and that would score more highly on a tendering process, is that right?
Yeah, so part of the lower end of this procurement, it does specify TR7 and then TR as your preferred option supplier, so it does try to keep it local. In terms of tender specifications, when you're writing the specification, all of the scores are weighted, so it's called weighting, and if there is an element where you want them to be local, you can weight that particular score more than others. You do need to be a little bit careful in what you're doing though, because at the end of the day, you would probably want a better service or product or result than it just being done by the most local person. So you couldn't weight it too heavily, but if that's really important, there are all kinds of policies and things that could be implemented around using local, which can be built on this. So if that's something that you want to look at, that's something we can definitely do.
Yeah, I guess it was like, do we score it at the moment when it's over the 500,000, and what process would we need to go on? And what, I guess I'd sort of ask members, like, what would be the process of us starting to implement more of a, and it's obviously not saying like every contract we ever give they have to live in TR7, but how could we start to see that balance shift? Because I think it is important that as a town council we're supporting our local businesses, and sometimes by getting a contract with a council, it can also enable them to be more competitive and grow and develop in whatever they're delivering. So I just wanted to know a bit more about how we start to make that happen.
Great.
So I think I hear what you're saying, Jessie, and so there's a bit of an oxymoron in all of these things for me, because you first of all, it talks about best value, doesn't it? And then as soon as you go into a tender process, you have to put up the value that you're willing to spend. So, you know, it is a bit of an oxymoron, because you're never going to get best value by saying to that builder, I've got this much money to spend, how much are you going to charge me? So I always find it completely mind-boggling. But what I do know, and I think, Anne, you know, please, I'm probably putting words in your mouth, but I know that you're looking at a framework of contractors for work that we often go out to tender for locally, that we can put on this framework system. I think it's a longer term piece of work that you're looking at, so that we can get that kind of consistent local contracting. But as Anne says, you know, we can obviously weigh these things as best as possible. But I know, you know, looking at the play park tender just recently, obviously you want to get the best quality product, you know, for the amount of money that you're going to spend. And so, you know, that unfortunately we can't really weight that to a kind of a Cornwall postcode, I guess, because there aren't that many play park companies in Cornwall building these things of good quality. So there is definitely a balance, but I think weighting it towards local where it's feasible, absolutely, and I think you're already doing that.
I think with all of these things, I think you probably look at a best practice ordering, won't you, of, you know, Newquay, Cornwall, South West, national, international, and I'm sure you'll go through a strategy, because I mean that applies for all things in terms of ethical makeup and all that sort of thing as well. Yeah, sort of like you don't want a company down the road who's sort of like gun running in the Middle East or somewhere like that. Maybe there might be some issues. So I think there's a strategy, and maybe that could be a working party that might think of you in terms of working out best practice for working out tender practice for going into the future. Yeah.
And one of the big things that obviously comes into this, and I'm never against local, but when we're going to tender, we tend to be going for big pieces of work, you know, they're big for us. And there is always a risk, and a high risk, when you're using local businesses, when your contract could be 3 times their annual turnover. There is a massive risk associated to that. And those kind of things have to come into play as well.
No, absolutely. And so there's a whole bigger, you know, but, you know, I know for like local, you know, for small scale equipment, then I recommended a local retailer over a big national brand, and actually went with the local retailer, and it was a better price in the end than you would have got from friendly neighbourhood national company. So it's got swings and roundabouts and all those sorts of things. So it's good to hear that Anne's on top of that, and, you know, working way forward on that going into the future. So any other points to make? Brilliant. Okay, so what we're doing then is voting for this for recommendation to full council. So I'm happy to propose. Seconder? Councillor Wright. All those in favour? Brilliant, thank you. Next one then is Andy discussing the standing orders. Thank you, Andy.
Yes, thank you very much. So a few less changes in this version. So this does have track changes through it. I will quickly go through them. So just keep scrolling. There's no quick way of doing this. I apologise. So there's a couple of minor amendments in terms of wording where we've missed some phraseology. So page 13, item 9A, it's "and in any event" as an example. These are all highlighted. I think if I focus on the major changes, so there's some, if I keep scrolling, I will wear it out. So a couple of title changes on page 17, just to regularise in accordance with the new directives that we have, and title changes as part of the staff structure. I'm going to have to change the sound of this mic. Yeah, page 20, the council, an officer with delegated responsibility, a committee or a sub, but it's under item D, so 18D. This is around procurement. So it's just recognising that an officer that has delegated authority can make purchases. It's clarity more than actually affecting any change. Some of the more key changes are to section 19. So this is now where we've got a people manager in post. They are permanent, full-time, and they are the best place really for handling staff matters. They also have KPIs set by the committee, and so it was important, I think, to recognise that in the standing orders, so they're there for everyone to see. Couple of tweaks in terms of bringing the people manager in with myself in terms of making some decisions and handling staff matters and resolutions. So that's where C, there's a change, and also D. So again, it's recognising that post exists now. I think another section is recognising that you've appointed your data protection and IT manager as the data protection officer. That's 21A. And then under 23C, it's recognising that officers can enter contracts under the scheme of delegation. So at the moment it's unclear. We're adding that clarity that actually under the scheme of delegation, yes, your directors and myself we can enter contracts. That's under the ceiling item. Then on 25, subsection A3, new section, this is to again add clarity that at the moment members cannot interfere with officers when they're performing their duties. So it's adding a bit of clarity there. That already exists, but we thought it was important to have it in there. And that clarifies that this is outside of working parties, any scrutiny that may be taking place under committees. That still happens. This is individual members saying, I'm going to go and speak to that officer and tell them not to do this. That's effectively what we're saying in standing orders. So it is already in existence. It's just clarifying it as an opportunity to clarify. And then a new section, so section 28, which is the operational culture. I found it was important to reflect the journey the council is on. And so understanding orders, which gets published and is given to every new member, and you know, we do training on this. There should be a section there about the operational culture and what does that mean. And so I've put a couple of points here. I'm not wedded to the language used, so I have put in some language here that hopefully is very clear, that clarifies to members that some of the, so scrutiny is in here. Well, actually, if there's an employment law matter happening in an employment process, scrutiny does not overtake that because you are dealing with employment law. So that has to run its course. Scrutiny comes second to that. So you couldn't have a scrutining process from a committee that wants to look at something and demanding information and trying to effect change at the same time as an employment matter where you may have a member of staff being dismissed, because you have to be very careful on the evidence and maintaining that evidence. So it's just to clarify that, but I think these points do make reference to, you know, if that employment process actually wants scrutiny, it can go to a committee and say, we'd like you to scrutinise this, please set up a working party and do that. And it gives a bit of a framework of how to do that to avoid some of the pitfalls we've seen in other councils where, you know, scrutiny may have taken place in a very public, open setting, and then you find employment tribunals follow. So it's trying to protect the council, but also offer members comfort that there is a scrutiny process and there is a right way of doing it, and that process would be seen through. So there's a couple of items there, particularly around 28, D, E and F, that talk specifically about scrutiny processes. And then G, it's again, I know we all know it, but we want to say it in standing orders. This is about officers and members working together, not against each other. We're one team. So it's just actually putting that on paper and saying, you know, we're here for the same job. We may have different roles to play, but we are here for the same purpose. So it's just adding some of that and clarifying as well around disclosable and registrable interests, and where the lines are on some of that, because I know that can be blurred sometimes. That's pretty much it. So the rest are minor tweaks. So it's really whether members are happy. This is a living document, so it is subject to change throughout the year. But I think having a version that members can adopt at the annual council meeting would be really helpful. And then you can refine it as and when, as a journey.
So an iterative thing, things crop up, things changes, you know, it's going to be stuff which people haven't thought of, we're all human, and then it can be changed accordingly. So, questions on this, anybody? No, I think Councillor Jacobs just beat you to it, yeah.
Sorry, I'm really not like this at all meetings. I think what I would love to see, again, with the sort of looking at the new committee structure, if that goes ahead at full council, because I know standing orders, correct me if I'm wrong, like we can shape them, and I sort of look through it and I just feel like, is there a way that we can build in more democratic engagement? I am going to be the person who always, it was my day job for years, and it's something I'm passionate about in terms of basically democracy and participation and public participation in decision making. So I'm always going to be that person in the room, but I would love to take a lens over this over the coming year to look at what we can learn from potentially other town councils that have brought in more participatory engagement with the public and who've been doing it really well as an example of best practice. So it's not saying there's anything wrong with this at all, but I'd be really interested in maybe looking with a lens of participation over our standing orders and to consider what going forward and what maybe a proposal next year might look like if we can address some of that. So I know, for instance, I think it's probably Froome, lots of people talk about, but there's others, Buckfastleigh, where they looked at standing orders and they changed how the public does engage with council meetings and what action groups that they have and other things. So I'm just saying this is really good, and it feels like it's a very robust that's going to keep the council safe and secure. But could we also start to look at how we build in participation and stronger democracy within it going forward?
Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy with that. What I would say is we do have a community engagement policy, and so that's probably also a good starting point to actually say, well, in that, do you start building in participatory budgets? Do you start saying, well, actually, do we have so many meetings a year in the community at the local, whether it's a pub or anything like that, where it isn't actually a committee meeting, but actually the public can engage with officers and members. But standing orders, generally they're the rules of the council. They are your usual, how do you vote, how do you stand up and talk? I think the next step is actually, does it interact appropriately with your community engagement policy? And is that something we can tweak?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's quite a good idea. And look, thinking of that then over the next year when other things are beginning to resolve themselves, and it's we got time and space and things with new member staff and everything that we can start looking at that. Councillor Creek.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple of things, Andy. Just one quick question. So I can't remember which section it is now, but the bit that talks about the CEO appraisal, obviously that's on later in the agenda. So presumably that will get updated after we've had that conversation later ahead of full council. Is that right? It was a personal point, I suppose, but 28G, the last line of 28G, I don't know. There's something about it that just makes me wince just a tiny bit. I don't know why. It feels a little bit like, I don't know, preachy is not the word I'm looking for, but I think it probably better not said than said, but that's just a personal view, I think. But I think it's good to set the context of that kind of relationship and the operational culture, particularly between staff and councillors, and that this shouldn't be a barrier to engaging with staff and councillors and the other way around. And actually, I'd encourage all councillors to get out and get to know the staff a bit more, but it's quite right that we have some boundaries around that. I think, Jesse, on your point, I think you make a really good point. I'd be really interested to hear actually about Buckfastleigh and what they've done. I wasn't aware of what they've done there, but I do think it just speaks to this community engagement piece, and something that, and it's particularly live in my head only because I've spent a bit of time there just in the last few weeks, but at Nansledden, and more residents tell me there's this barrier between Newquay and Nansledden, and let's be honest, Nansledden's part of Newquay, and we need to find a way of breaking down some of those boundaries, and I get from their perspective really frustrating because actually, it's a whole new estate and we don't have any assets on that estate at all. Therefore, we don't really have any presence on that estate. We don't really do anything for that community. So rightly they ask, well, why are we part of Newquay? What is Newquay Town Council doing for us? And I think we need to try and work towards breaking some of those boundaries down. And I think, love to work with you on that. Anyway, that was just a couple of points.
I think that opened up a little can of worms there.
It did, yeah. But honestly, the number of residents in the last couple of weeks.
But I mean, the Duchy is very good at promoting Nansledden as a Duchy community, isn't it? Sort of. So it's a bit of what do the Romans do for us sort of situation.
The royal family at the moment, probably the best.
Shh. He'll be listening.
He will. Well, he's in America at the moment, so he's safely, he's all right.
Okay. Well, he is God. Anyway, right, stop it. Right, so I think, yes, we need to bear in mind it's an iterative document. It can change over time and the circumstances, and some good suggestions for that to consider going into the future, to maybe put another element on that in terms of looking at our community engagement policy and maybe how that can be blended in a paragraph or two in here as well. So this is voting then for going to recommendation to full council. I'm happy to propose. Seconder? Councillor Creek. All those in favour? Against? Abstain? Yeah. And you get there eventually. I was trying to keep my eye on it when your hand was going up. Right, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, so then we've got the assertion reviews. So this is about noting really well that due process has been done on these. And do you want to actually say anything on these? No, this sort of thank you for those people who've done them. I haven't been called on to as an emergency backup at all, so thank you for everyone doing their due assertive reviews. Brilliant. So nobody got any questions on those? No, great. So the annual investment report. Oh, do we need to vote on the process has been taken? Sorry, yes. So I'm happy to propose that due process taken. Councillor Creech seconded. All those in favour? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. That's everybody. Annual investment report. Sorry, it's over to you. It's like the Anne show tonight, isn't it? Gosh.
Sorry.
All tap dancing and...
This is just an update of your return on your investment last year, where you are, but also within the comments at the end, it just sort of said that we tidied up the investment policy in February, GNR, and that we do need to balance our risk and get a few different companies in there, but that's not a project that we've been able to achieve yet. So there is an element there where we're not meeting that, but we will get there in time. So just so that you're aware.
Yeah, I think it was the isn't there a recommendation then that you and Andy can actually money shuffle?
Yeah, that's
so as Councillor North laughing at me. So being you know, money savvy and things, if we know that we've got a certain amount of money that we're not going to be using for, you know, a few months, for instance, like you do at home, that you can actually put it in and get a bit better interest rate if you're not using something for three months, 6 months. So it's trying to get the best easy money from the precept that, you know, the community for paying us. So yeah, so recommendation for authorisation for that. So I'm happy to propose that. Seconder, Councillor North. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. No, I didn't see them. All those in favour? That was everybody, wasn't it? Was that a question, Jessie? Sorry, no, you were seconding. Sorry. So now we go on to 11, which is the Council's Community Fund Policies and Report. She says, I've written something on here. So we got two policies in here, and so which has been a big. So, Steve, did you have a question? So no, what? You're throwing me now.
It's just to say that I'll be leading on this, not Andy as the chief
sorry.
exec. That's okay. Just
Sorry. Sorry. Joint effort from Steve and Anne again on this. So Steve on that. So you're going to talk about this then, Steve? Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, no problem. Yes, I will. So there's two policies. One has been track changed, which is the Councillor Community Fund policy. So there's some minor reworkings of that just to make it a little bit easier to process from an operational side, but it doesn't depart from the usual custom of councillors being involved in that process. You know, so members of the public will need to approach their councillor about a particular project, get the councillor's approval, then they can complete the application paperwork, and then the officer can deal with that with the councillor, and that information will be published on the website. The only change really is that we're proposing that there shouldn't be an aggregation of councillors' individual allocations, so that would enable more a higher number of smaller community grants to be given, rather than those being aggregated, with the view that if projects are of a larger size, i.e. above £250, they should come under the separate council grants policy, which can deal with projects that are above that threshold. So it's trying to support councillors supporting their individual projects that are small size, small scale, really community driven. So that's that one policy. The one that gets a bit more complicated, a bit more detailed, is the council grant policy. That's not track change because there's significant changes throughout that document. And we're really trying to capture those projects that are above £250 up to £1,000, then above £1,000 upwards to £4,000. And it's this tiered approach that we're trying to bring in. So for the ones that are up to £1,000, that's going to be under the scheme of delegation. That's an officer decision. But clearly we'll make sure we publish any decisions on our website and bring them to committee. For the ones that are higher value, £1,000 to £4,000, again, there's an opportunity for council to support those, but we will take a different approach with that, and they'll be considered by officers, but we'll also involve the Chief Finance Officer in those as well. And for those larger values of £1,000 to £4,000, they'll be referred to members of the GNR committee. So we won't just sign those off as officers. They'll be referred to the GNR committee by email, and you get to decide that on a majority basis. But if you want to call that in for a presentation, it will only take 3 members to do that. So if you call that in, we will then make sure that a presentation is lined up. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a GNR committee meeting. We can just line that up whenever it's an available and a convenient time that we can get members of the GNR committee to consider that grant request in more detail. We've also trying to future-proof the policy, and this one is subject to budget setting in the 27-28 budget setting process, and that's for a sort of delivery partner arrangement where you can choose to fund longer and higher value projects. So we're suggesting that there should be a budget of around £10,000 put in for the 27-28 budget. That will enable you to support something like 4 larger scale projects which you prefer as like a delivery partner. That's about £2,500 per year per project, so there could be 4 of those projects. But with that, we're looking for those delivery partners to have skin in the game. And so you might take a view that you'd only support those projects up to a 75% sort of gearing ratio, with the expectation that they would find 25% as their own match. You can, of course, not go with that as a council. You could actually say, we really like this as a project. We think that they don't necessarily can get that gearing because they are a true community-led project, and you might want to fund that up to 100%. All through this, there will be woven into it a requirement for them to complete application forms to provide us with their bank statements so that we can do those due diligence tests that you would necessarily expect to take place behind the scenes. And us as officers will do that piece of work. I haven't copied the application forms to you. They'll be separately on an online form, and we're just working through how we would deal with that as an online form and whether we can enable people to fill those application forms in an evening rather than trying to do it in one go, so they can come at it piecemeal. We're also going to be building in a scoring matrix that we would follow, so that there's a good consistent approach to how we would appraise projects. And again, we would bring all of this information and have that on a page on the website, so people can access the application forms, look at the guidance. We'll compose some FAQs as well. And so we're really looking at trying to future-proof that element of the policy going forwards. But that is subject to 27-28 budget setting arrangements. So it is, in essence, in 2 parts to start with. We've got the Councillor Community Fund, which is a £5,000 total allocation at £250 per councillor. And then we've got a council grants policy, which is currently £7,500, which can support these projects that range from up to £1,000, then £1,000 to £4,000. And for those 1,000 to 4,000 will come back to GNR via email. You get to call that in if you want to see the detail by presentation. There's a lot to go through in there. There's a lot of detail in the policy. Some of the key changes I've set out in the front report. I mean, I've moved away from you having 2 windows where people can come into. You can go back to that if you like. I mean, doing those windows, it does mean that you get a number of projects in at once and you can appraise them as a set, and therefore you can get to see which projects are the better projects rather than doing on a first come first served basis. So there's that way of doing it. I've also removed the appeals process. It's talking to staff, there's not been an appeal in the last 7 years from any project coming forwards, and under the Good Growth £186 million fund that Cornwall Council managed, there was no appeals process. So I think it comes down to how you score those projects. Do they pass due diligence? Do they stack up financially from an accounts perspective? All of those things will be taken into account as part of the scoring element of that. And we'll also score those projects that come forward against our corporate plan. So there's an element around seeing where projects that come forward fit in terms of your aspirations as a council. We're not trying to skew projects, we're just trying to see do the projects fit with some of the aims and aspirations you've got. And that scoring matrix will be a wide scoring matrix in terms of we're not trying to say no to a large number of projects. We're trying to make sure that we get good projects that are evenly balanced, that are trying to do good things for Newquay as a whole. So that's the process behind quite significant changes to the council policy document.
Thank you. An awful lot of work's gone into that. Well done. Thank you for that. Liz.
Thank you for that. That sounds great. A couple of questions. One, how often will people be able to apply for grants? If they're successful, say someone's successful, when can they reapply?
It's an open window. People can apply for grants at any time. The only thing that is the restricting one is if you go into a delivery partner arrangement for larger projects. We're saying that if you fund them for, say, 2 or 3 years on that arrangement, that they then shouldn't really be able to come back into that scheme commensurate with the amount of time that you fund them for.
Yeah.
Under the values up to, say, £1,000, you might have a view that they shouldn't apply for another 12 months, up to 12 months, something like that.
Okay. I need to go through this in a bit more detail so I can come back to you with more questions. But the other question that I had is the grant form going to be the only way that people can apply, or are we going to be a bit more flexible and allow people to submit applications through voice notes or videos or other means that people might want to apply? Because filling in a form is challenging for some people, and being a little more open to other ways people can apply, I think, is good practice.
It's certainly currently an application form, but it doesn't stop people from providing us with any information they want to in support of that application. I don't know if you've got a view on that.
I think at the moment it is an application process. I think the majority of claims and grants are there, and we also do have 2 officers. We've got Beth and Kieran, who both have a projects and partnership. So they're there to be contacted and support people. We've talked about having videos online to show people as well. So I think the council's really working on its community engagement, especially with that team. We're getting really, really good networks. So hopefully, I mean, Kieran's done a lot in the past. Over the last 12 months, he's helped people who haven't been able to do that. So I'm hoping that would be the way we would get around that, because I think it's really difficult to have something that can be so flexible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a way of enabling someone to just speak their application rather than type it, is just another way of people being able to apply, which I don't think is any more admin than, because you can transcribe what they've said and run that through AI and get it still written down anyway, which actually they could probably do. But anyway, it was more just an accessibility side of things. And one of the barriers that we know is people filling the forms in, and if Kieran and Beth, thank you, are able to offer some drop-in sessions to let people, to help people then we know that that will break down some of the challenges that people have with the form. So yeah, that really advocate for more of those. That would be great.
We'll certainly be putting together some FAQs as well as part of that documentation on the website. So it'll try and deal with those sort of like routine questions that people might have around what do we mean by that when we ask that in an application form. That worked well under the good growth element. And we've also talked about whether we can do a video to talk people through how to fill in the application form, like a little webinar type thing. So there are things we're looking at, but it's going to take a bit of time to get all of that detail together. But we've certainly spoken to Kieran and Beth around supporting people that get stuck or just want to ask questions. So we will have that as an open door, and we'll offer that on the website as well as that route in.
Can I just add one bit on that, in that I've always tried to be really open and available for groups as well. So I know that with the partners, if there are certain things that they need to understand how we're going to view them, I've offered to meet and things. So, and I have done so already. So, that we try to be as helpful as we possibly can.
It's wonderful. Anne came to a Nuki and Bloom meeting and went through it all. So the finance lady could know what to do, really, and add a lot of clarity. So, and it was a good way for seeing what Nuki and Bloom do as well. So, other questions? Yep. Oh, sorry. Yep. And then.
Thank you. So, I really like this, Steve, and I think as the person that was the architect of the gateway system, I think the reasons that we went into that were absolutely the right reasons. I think the operational way in which that, I don't want to say operational delivery because I don't think it was the officer's issue. I just think it just didn't work in the way that we wanted it to work. But I think we still come back to the same problem, which is we have a finite amount of grant money. The thing that makes me a little nervous is how do we protect that grant money so that it isn't all spent in the first couple of months of the year, and then someone comes in, or a big grant comes in at the beginning of the year, and so I'd welcome your many years of experience in this field, Steve, to give us some thoughts on that. The other questions were, so it was the community chest. Presumably that's open now for this year. Yay. So that's great news. I'd love to do some promo on that with the comms team. Maybe we could do a video or something for social media. That'd be fun. And is Kathy managing that? Well done, Kathy. It's a big job. Obviously, it's less than it used to be. So, I'm a bit nervous about the 250 limit on that, and the fact that you can't compound more than one councillor, just because of the fact that it used to be 500 and now it's 250. I don't know whether I'd welcome other councillors' thoughts on whether we should make that 500 and not 250, just because of that. And then the only other thing was really welcome the partnership thing. This is something I've been going on for a long time, and presumably that's going to be more of a cultural bid as opposed to anything else in terms of partners that want to go into that partnership model. Presumably that's more towards culture and those sorts of bids as opposed to, I don't know, I'm trying to think, or I don't know.
It's more than the physical capital.
Yeah. It's less capital, more kind of a cultural revenue piece, I suppose. Is that how you see it?
I don't think I've been prescriptive in that because I didn't know really what was going to come forwards under those delivery partner arrangements. So being not prescriptive is quite good because you'll get a mix of things come through that you can consider, and ultimately you get to decide whether you want to support it or not based on a range of different measures that you've assessed. In terms of whether grants will get eaten up at the beginning of the year and then a project might come in later in the year, that's always a danger. The only way around that really is to probably have two windows where you could say you have the first window at the first part of the year that you could, and have a shut-off date, and then you assess those projects at that shut-off date. But again, you might get so much value that you only then fund projects for that first half of the year and not the other part of the year. So either way that you run it, you run a risk of funding stuff that is shovel ready and there that you can fund, and that's always the danger with any funding programmes. You can only fund what's there and what's ready. And that was a problem with really big schemes, and it will be the same problem with really small schemes. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. I think you've clearly got some experience in this field, Steve, at Cornwall Council, and so welcome your expertise there. The other question I was going to ask is the community chest. That's presumably a less laborious form than the normal grants process. I know it used to be just a really quick online form that we used to do. Brilliant. And then also just to say, really pleased within the policy, and I read it earlier this afternoon, I can't find it now, but in there it talks about how the recipients of the grants kind of promote where they've come from, because I think that's something that we've not been great at doing over the years. Is we've been giving all this money out, but actually no one really knows about it, and it's good to celebrate where the community's money's going. So thank you for that.
Can I just, yeah, I mean, we started with like actual capital things. Were we having the expectation they put a little Newquay Town Council sponsored sign up?
We talked about plaques at one point.
Yeah.
The cricket club was
It was a pretty, yeah. That was a couple of years ago. And whether they put that on, if they're doing something and it's promoted on social, that Newquay Town Council has sponsored that. I don't know if that could go in as one of the.
I think I covered that in the policy to say that they
Okay.
should recognise Newquay Town Council's contribution in any form of media release, media statement, and that they should work with us and notify us so that we can go into a joint arrangement around that comms piece. I haven't been prescriptive about plaques and all those sorts of things just purely because they cost money and are usually the bit that gets problematic at the end in terms of the wording on that and the logos and actually for the size of the projects we're talking about, it just eats into probably the budget they want to put towards the good work that they're doing in the community. So I think as long as there is that branding and guideline bit around recognising Newquay Town Council's contribution and being in a joint partnership arrangement around media and comms, I think that's probably sufficient for the amounts of money we're talking about.
Yeah, I do see it with lottery funded projects when they have the little lottery sign, and those little aluminium signs, they're pretty cheap to an A5 thing.
I think one of the things that we've got really good at now that we have a really strong comms team is actually the internal communications about what's happening, that feedback with the actual people that have got the funding, and promoting the amount of social media and other things that we're doing. We're getting really clever at that, which we didn't have before. So I think that's a really positive thing too.
Yeah, before we go to Jessie, can I just put in a vote for extra time, because we've got quite a bit still to get through. So if I'm happy to propose another hour, hopefully we'll be done before that. So seconder, Councillor North, all those in favour? I don't know, like in favour of the extra time. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Right, Councillor Jacobs.
I won't get invited back to this meeting, will I? I feel like I'm responsible for about an hour of it. Anyway, I just had two questions. One was just as a person who's run a charity that applies for grants, I was looking at the kind of the policies that you ask for up front, and I just wondered, in terms of simplifying it, could applicants actually state that they have those policies, but then you basically outline that no funding will be given until we have seen your policy. So you don't have to ask, because when you go onto a website and you see and you've got to put this insurance and that, it's so daunting because it's not just like the actual application, it's all the other forms. Where if you can say that they can, upon being successful of the grant, they have to show that they have all those, and you do it in the scrutiny sort of part of it, not the actual upfront part of it, because I know most grant making trusts in the country don't ask for, like, there's a lot of them that wouldn't ask for all of these things up front, and I know it's slightly different because we're a council, but I presume as long as they can confirm they have it and no funds goes to them until we've seen it, I'm not sure if we can actually reduce it at the bureaucracy on sort of first pass. That was my first thing. And then the second one was, is this just for what happens to the previous community and tourism grants, and are they staying the same? Will we have a similar grants strategy, or is this to cover all grants? Because obviously part of, again, it was quite an engaging part of the meeting where members got to decide and sort of have a debate about different grants that came in, whereas obviously all of this looks like it's mostly officers' decision making now on grants, but I just wondered if that's the same for the committees as well, or whatever the new committee potentially will be.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things. The policy sets out that under the different values, officers will make the decisions, and then members up to £4,000 can get them, call them into a meeting, and then over that it would go to GNR as well. So this is for all, this policy applies to all funds that are highlighted as grants, so everybody's kept the same. In terms of documents being uploaded, we're going to make it really, really clear that those documents need, you do a passport, you do a lot of things nowadays, and it says you need these before you start. And I think one of the things that we have spent a lot of time doing is chasing people up. And I think the amounts of money that we have for grant funding don't actually go very far. And I think we can't be just constantly chasing people. If you want pots of money, and everybody wants money nowadays, you've got to be on it. And may sound really, really harsh, but actually if we're really open in what we need, why we need it, and it's there before you actually start to fill in the application, it means that when it goes to the officer, they can actually make a decision. They're not then going back going, well, I need this, I need that, I need this. You're going to have to supply it. So that's the kind of, we're trying to keep it simplified as well as, quick, because the thing is, these things won't go to committee anymore. They will be made by officers, the decisions made by officers GNR, and that's part of this scheme of delegation and all the rest of it that goes along with it. It's only if members call them in that's when they will get involved. And with the partners side of it, that's part of the budget setting process. They will the partners for the forthcoming years will be part of that process. So that's where members will be involved.
Is it going to be the same members, the same officers making the decisions on this every time?
Then it's specified who, so yes.
Okay. Is there a risk then that there's unintentional bias from those 2 or 3 people just making the same decisions? Because I think when it came to committee, we had the debates and we had different, when it came to committees, we had different interests, different opinions and thoughts on who was in receipt of the grants, whereas if it's just the same, whoever, I haven't seen the full thing, so whoever it is making them, that there's people that might get left out because you have two comparable applications, and one of them is for football and one of them is for a ceramics class. And actually, they are both the same in terms of our due diligence, but actually someone just prefers football, so they just want to fund the football. And actually then we have lots and lots of football that's been funded and no art. But at least when it came to committee, we could have that debate, and we could, we'd have different thoughts and opinions and likes and wants that were coming through. So I just wonder where that scrutiny will lie, and how we don't get stuck into, well, this person, whoever it is, just going, oh, I really like ceramics, I only want to fund ceramics.
I mean, I would assume that all the applications will be reviewed on a first come, first served basis. So that's how they will be assessed, and everything will be scored. Yeah. So it's not going to be down to, I prefer one over another. It's going to be, this one came in before that one. It's along the lines of our corporate plan, because we're trying to link them into what we want to achieve. So everything that gets a grant should be along the lines of what you've already said you want to achieve and what you want to support. And there is a scoring matrix alongside it. So it's not like, oh, I fancy this one, I don't fancy that. There is a process that, you go through. And at the end of the day, all of these decisions go onto the decision log. So as a committee, if you're not happy with something that's going on, ultimately you're able to come to Andy and have some input into that. But you would hope, and I would assume, that there is no officer that would do that.
I would also hope that, and would assume, I'm just raising it as a potential. But also just on that process then, so if we are seeing decisions that are being made and we want to challenge that, at what point are we able to challenge that? Before the decision goes to the recipients, or before?
Once the decision's made, that's what the delegated authority is.
Yeah.
So what you would be able to do is highlight your dissatisfaction or your concerns, and that would be then addressed for all future claims,
right,
or
okay.
for future applications.
I think also it's worth noting that for the grants that are up to the £1,000 mark, that will be the Democratic Services Manager taking a view on the applications that come in on a first come, first served basis. When it's £1,000 to £4,000, it would be...
That's when we get to call them in.
It would be the Democratic Services Manager, then one director. It doesn't need to be the same director, because we'll have that scoring matrix in place. So it could be, if it's, an operational, sort of like the director of operations side of the world, it could be that we bring in that director to have a view on it. So it could be...
So where does Amy come into this, just out of interest? Because some of these grants, especially the partnership ones, might be with ongoing events. So will she have oversight of any of this or input into it? Because that would probably lie where some of those relationships will come from and be built upon.
So basically what we've said is that the committees have generally in the past put in some money into events that they want to use with that event. They will still need to go through this process, but it's a separate budget. And the issue that we have is we're just talking about the grants.
Oh, I understand all of that, but some of these grants will be for events. They will be, because they will. People will come to us for event money, and then it's where does that conversation happen that actually this is one we do want to do in partnership, so we'll give the 75% and this event needs to go find the other 25, but that actually will sit under Amy's remit if we're partnering on an event and it sits in within our event calendar. So I'm just wondering how that might...
I mean, in that scenario, that's the sort of thing that would be appraised and then would, be emailed to you as G&R committee, and then you get an option.
Or the event working party.
And then you get an option to call that in and have a presentation. And there's no reason why we couldn't have the events manager there to come along and to
just for supporting her and everything working cohesively across departments. Yeah. I think that Amy at some point, will need to be brought in so that she's able to do her job.
I know Councillor Jacobs.
Sorry, Jessie. Sorry.
I feel like this is another thing that we're using this delegated authority, but it's like, where does, what I'm going to say, community engagement, democracy, the strategic view of what was happening with events, it would come to Community and Tourism Committee, we would discuss it, we would look at whether it fitted with the plans. So basically, and I requested in the Community and Tourism meeting, I'd really like to look at how we give out grants to the public, and can we open this out anymore? Could we look at participatory budgeting? And what I'm reading at the moment is a grants policy that now says that 2 officers or 1 officer will make all the decisions on the community grants that we give out other than our council grants. I think that's what I'm correct in reading. So I'm quite disappointed. It hasn't brought in any participatory, it hasn't brought in any community decision making. It's actually taken away decision making powers from the members and it's given it to officers. It's literally the opposite of what I was hoping that we would get when I brought it to the Community and Tourism Committee and asked that our grants policy would looked at. So I don't like it. I'm not for it. I would have liked to have seen something that was even that came back to, and when I requested at the Community and Tourism Committee meeting, when I said we would like to have some sort of debate on that, when I was told there wasn't enough to put on the agenda, I was like, well, I'd really like the grants policy to be put on the agenda. And so it was informed that the grants policy is coming without the engagement of us as members who'd requested it in the first place. So I'm just saying I'm going to state my unhappiness with this, and I feel like we're giving away power in this meeting.
Steve, what is a world of the calling option, so the call-in option, for the up to £1,000 grants look like as well?
I mean, currently there isn't one. So for grants that are above £250 up to £1,000, that would be a decision taken by an officer, which is in line with the scheme of delegation which you guys have brought in. Now, if you want to amend that and change that, we can certainly do that. It's not, this isn't set in stone, it's a draft policy.
Yeah.
But you just add in more layers to the process and it elongates.
So I suppose,
all of those matters.
and you're waving your hand at me, so do you want to go?
I just want to say we had feedback via our grants person that the biggest problem was the community were losing faith in Newquay Town Council giving out grants when they needed them because committees weren't meeting or weren't quorate and they weren't able to get their money in time, so we weren't a reliable grant funding organisation. So what we said was that's got to be our core focus. We want people to get money. We haven't spent all our grant money in last financial year, and that's because of the processes and the fact that committees haven't been able to meet. And the way we felt was looking at it, when they come to the smaller grants which people are putting for, we don't want to have to go to committee that might not meet. We want to be able to support the local communities, and that's why we come with this tiered approach, so that the larger grants come to you for your decision and your input, but when it comes to the lower ones, there's no delay, and we can get the money out to the community, because that's what's not been happening, and that's the feedback that we've had through our grants officer over the last 18 months.
So I think I'd agree with that, and getting the money out the door as quickly as possible to the small grassroots organisations that need it, the principle of which I completely agree with. I suppose the only thing, and I'd welcome Councillor North's thoughts on this particularly, but the only thing I will say is there is something inherently quite nice about the role of councillor when you're giving the money out. And so having that level of engagement with the community, you know, to be able to offer them funds for important projects. And I think that there is something here that we're losing with that. And you know, completely cognizant and completely on board with the scheme of delegation, you know that. I think on this occasion, there's a little bit of reticence in me that just says, actually, we're distancing ourselves from some of the best work that we do, actually, and I don't really know what the middle ground is, and I don't want to make it more laborious and delay the money going out the door, because it is really important, and I think you're right, and again, I completely accept that part of that's my fault for wanting to do this gateway thing for the right reasons, but I think it hasn't worked in the way that we want, and I think that's probably led to some of that community frustration. So hold my hands up for that. But there's just something missing there, I think. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a bit like the assertive review, perhaps there's a couple, you know, you get a couple of councillors that just have a look at, see what grant applications have come in, and then they can sort of just have a quick look at that. I don't know. Yeah, Andy?
Well, all I would say is obviously there's a risk with that because those members may have their own views on grants. Exactly. So I think, and you know, I'll be careful with that. So from my point of view, scheme of delegation's gone forwards. We have not yet triggered that really, and that's officers holding back because we want the processes to work. We want members to have the faith and the trust in the officers making those decisions correctly for the right reasons without any bias and things like that. Part of me almost wants to suggest let's try it and see, because it's £7,000 a year. You're talking peanuts. We get more of that 60 grand a year in bank interest alone. So, you know, or if members want safeguards, we can build those in. We can put them in at this stage and perhaps review it again at the next GNR meeting or a couple of months down the line.
It's all new, isn't it?
It's
so
new.
We've got to test things. We've got to test them.
So I get that, and I understand members, you know, there is something there. I get that, but until we try it, you know, you have a grants officer now, you didn't have them 12 months ago. You've got community, you know, the partnerships and projects officers again, didn't have that before. So there are people there that have the pulse of what's out there, and they are talking, and they can talk to members. We can build that in as well, that they then must liaise with members. I think there's a few things there we can do, but it's how far are we? I'm conscious of time.
So, yeah. So I think, yes, I think we see how it goes, and next year now, can we have a review then as to, I know you're twitching there in my peripheral view, but I am conscious that we still have stuff to get through. And are you making a new point? Or
So I'm presuming that we get a vote on this. So I would ask members to not vote for it. I think that, like Drew said, like the making the decisions on the grants is where we saw most engagement with our members of the committee. It was something that it felt very meaningful, and it's taken away a part of something that members actually got a lot from. Again, we've gone from here's a problem, we'll make things more structures and more kind of officer led, but I'm not seeing anything that's coming that is actually how can we give power back, not to officers but to the public. And so actually, moving to participatory budget might be one step too far, but actually this isn't giving councillors, it was a really nice thing that councillors got to do, and I think that as I said, it's disappointing. I would say, if it's going to a vote, I'm going to be voting against it, and I'd ask that other members vote against it until we look at if there's other options.
Thank you. Councillor North.
So just a couple of things. We asked for this, in a sense, because we looked at delegation, but in truth, some of the members on committees are quite biased in what they enjoy more than others. I feel in this way the officers are here as employees and they're not going to be as biased. There is a matrix. We never had that before. They'd come to the committee, they'd tell us something, we'd think yay or nay. So as far as I'm concerned, we as councillors ourselves are all getting back £250 a year, which that was, to me, that was a nice thing for me when people approached us. So if you weren't on C&T, you weren't part of that process, but when you had your own little budget, you were. So, I'll be voting for it, I will say. I just want to ask one thing. I'm really picky about abbreviations, and I've been trying since I read the report last night. On page 2, what is an M&S application?
Which policy?
The GNR Grants Policy Report. It's literally under subject to 2027-28 budget. Probably something very simple, but, Microsoft. Well, then, to me, I've struggled what that might be. The members of the public will certainly struggle with it. And there's never anything like silly questions we all, I was going to not ask, and then I thought, no, I can't think. I was thinking of all of that. But, so let's put it in right. But I'm in support of this.
Wants to make a quick point in a minute. Actually, with that should be with any document that's written, the full name should be there first with the abbreviation in brackets. Even when it's got GNR, you've got to make these policies that are then readable for for any member of the public as well. So I can imagine that actually could be quite a lot of things that. And that's not going to be changed instantly. So, I mean, it's a good call, Margaret. You should never assume that people know what acronyms are. Right, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thank you, because I always think GNR is like Guns N' Roses committee. But, isn't it? Yeah, no, I'm going to support it because I think my concern is that whole concern that money's just not getting out quick enough and it's getting stuck in endless debates. So unless you can find some kind of way to streamline it while we're trying it for this year, I just think it's more important to get the money out to people than for everyone to feel nice.
Yeah. Turn myself back on again, thank you. Oh, no, that sounded really rude. No, I'm not going to do that.
So we're committing to a review at the next meeting then?
Yeah, we do it.
So one to review, we can schedule that in the next meeting. The next meeting, if the agenda goes according to plan, next week it would be July the 27th. So that gives you a window. All I would say is if you delayed tonight, so if it was to the next GNR, grants wouldn't happen until September onwards?
no.
Because you
I
haven't
mean-
got the ability to approve
Yeah.
any policy.
I mean, the main problem is that grants haven't been going out because committees haven't been sitting because they haven't been quorate. So all these things are trying to help remedy this. Right, okay. So recommendation then to full council then. I'm happy to propose this. Seconder, Councillor North got a hand up first. All those in favour? Against? And that was everybody on that one. Right, thank you.
When will we be launching the grant window or grants? After full council on meeting.
Whoop. No. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. You didn't have your sound out. How did you say no? No. Twitchy pen hand. Right. Oh gosh, where we got to? Review of HR policies. Now, there's a pile of HR policies, and what we're going to be doing is recommending them all for full council. But before we've got there, Harriet unfortunately isn't obviously with us today. So it's any questions to Andy and Anne that we might have that then can be raised with Harriet or taken forward. Right, so Margaret's got her report first.
So just a quick one about the absent management policy. For us in health, if somebody, they're off for 5 days, they can self-certificate, then you go to your fit notes. But if they say they're off with work-related stress, we immediately send them to occupational health. And I'd probably just like to see that in somewhere. I know that you talk in here about, referring to Occy Health, but I'd be saying if they have work-related stress on their fit note, that perhaps we should do that. That's only me.
So on that one, I think it's captured in the other policy, which is is it work-related or stress management policy? I will double check though.
They're absent because they've got stress. You can have a stress management policy, but it doesn't mean they're off sick with it. Whereas they're off sick, why they're off sick, what work-related stress, let's have them looked at.
Sure.
But
Yeah,
Yeah, so
happy with
yeah,
that.
have an overlap, then repeated. Yeah.
And if I just make the point that Harriet will be at the annual council meeting, so if there's
Yeah, yeah.
specifics as well, she will be
Yeah.
there to able to answer
Yeah, yeah.
those.
Yeah. Other questions? No? Yeah, no, I thought it was a twitch straight. Well, I'm happy to propose en masse then the recommendation then for full council. Councillor North seconding. All those in favour? Yeah. Oh, that was good. Oh, that's a whole row of questions for each one there. So, are you going now?
Yeah, I've got a job.
Okay, yeah, no, obviously, yeah. But we're still, yeah.
Do I need to say?
No, it's okay. Yeah. Oh gosh, where have we got to? Data government, go to governance policy is, hang on, turnover. This is just for noting, and it's going to go, so it's an update and it's going straight to full council. So this is just for noting. Has anybody got any questions that they want to pass forward to regarding this? No? Oh, Margaret has.
just in there to say what all the things are. So, member of the public might not know what an APD is or an LIA or an ROPA or a BIOD. Do you know what I mean? We might understand, but I think we should all be able to understand it.
It is the power with acronyms and things. It's very easy to slip into its assumption. Yeah. There's the whole... Well, it's like, the whole power thing, isn't it, as well, with acronyms. So, so do we need to vote on this?
No, it isn't for voting. All I would say is I think we've reviewed something like 27 documents which are going to annual council meeting, but we will make a note now for Will to just double check and make sure acronyms are covered.
Yeah.
Even if it has to be a front sheet temporarily whilst we go through everything, just to cover that.
If, putting on, what's the, not an appendix, a glossary. A glossary, if there's a lots on, it's a big document, a glossary is really good. Yeah, my PhD had a glossary. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, right. Correspondence? Yeah, still nothing. Fantastic. Right, now we have to go into exempt business. So I'm happy. I need to propose that. Seconder, Councillor Slade. All those in favour. This is when we turn off and say goodnight to everybody that's watching. And see you soon.